any different from any homosexual. You're just an ordinary sinner. If you feel you have a role to play as a Christian, please, and you think homosexuals are in the wrong, bring them to the church. Don't take them to Luzira. The church, God does not say that you should hang them or anything. He says, help them find salvation. Now, but let me talk something important about Pope Francis, because I have been working with a group of friends from Rome. One of them is the former Prime Minister of Italy, Gentili, who is now working at the United Nations on the panel for forgiveness of debt. So we have been working with the government of Ghana. In fact, I just returned from Accra about 3 days ago. Pope Francis was trying to launch an initiative, okay, at least we were working to, and he was going to be the leader of the initiative to help these countries like Kenya, Zambia, Ghana, which are heavily indebted, not get debt forgiveness, but convert their debt into a national asset in their local currency to fund SDGs, social development goals. It is so sad that he has died when he was supposed to launch this project in June. So I mourn him because of that. Regarding John Kazora, he was not just a friend, but he was also, I would say, a political mentor in my early years, because I would sit with that man and he tells me all the inside stories of what was happening, the maneuverings in parliament, the things that happen in the government. He had an incredible insight into politics. And if you listen to Kazora, you'd learn a lot about not how politics should work, but how politics actually works. And I think that's what I learned from him. It's unfortunate that his book was more concerned with how politics ought to work and paid less attention to how politics actually works. In the book, he became less of an analyst and became more of a preacher. And I'm much more interested not in those who preach, but more in those who analyze. Thank you very much. We've been joined by Honorable Captain Mike Mukula. Mike! The National Vice Chairperson, Eastern Region. I am very happy to be on the same panel with you tonight.
I'm exceedingly humbled.
You're very welcome, Honorable.
Thank you.
Your tribute to the late Pope and the late Honorable retired Major John Kazora.
First of all, I'd like to deeply extend my deepest condolences to the Catholic fraternity all over the world and the Christians all over the world. The Pope was the epitome of humility, the symbol of hope for Christianity, the fountain of honor in the religious, Catholic embodiment. Having served with humility and a person who visited Uganda, spent time with President Museveni with the family, was able to go to Namugongo, the opening of that historical monument and monumental point. It is something that we remember. It is now, after his trip, you know that many Christians all over the world, and mainly East and Central Africa, walk all the way to Namugongo, because it's now become not just a destiny for the Christians, especially with the martyrs, but to have seen him humble himself and go on his knees to pray for the souls of those who were martyred is something that I recall of a great man. Two is that he went to Sudan, and you know Sudan is the youngest nation in the world, and he was able to bring the two who are strong Catholics, the two co-presidents, the President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, the deputy, and prayed for them. One of the things I would like to say is that for peace to prevail in South Sudan, the demise of the Pope is something that the two should embrace and see that they bring peace to South Sudan. President Museveni is doing a great job in saving that country from the deep challenges they would have faced if our Ghanaian forces had not entered there. The other point is that he died without visiting his country when he was the Pope. Argentina, where he served with commitment. And you know that South America is where you have the largest Catholic population in the world. But he died without visiting his country. That is something that I do recall. It is very unfortunate, but I also like to thank the doctors who battled to try to save his life. But the Lord has spoken. With God's case, there is no appeal. May his soul rest in eternal peace. With Major Kazora, I was with him in the 6th Parliament. Major Kazora was a freedom fighter. I served with him in the Committee on National Economy, where I was the vice chairman. I recall I traveled with him to United States of America. We went to South Africa first, then to United States, over the Bujagali Dam. That dam, which was highly costed, had a lot of challenges. And Major Kazora was among the people that was able to put us together. And I do recall in the Committee of Parliament, and you know, the 6th Parliament is one of the best performing parliaments that you have had in this country. I served with him, and he was a man who was diligent, committed, a great freedom fighter, a great Pan-Africanist, and a great nationalist. I want to say to Naomi Kabasharra, his partner, his wife, and the children, some who live in Canada, John Kazora was a noble man. He was a great man. We may have had a political divide, our political journeys crossed, but I do recall that John Kazora was a man who was committed for this country's cause, and he had his views, and I had his strong views, and I respected them.
Thank you.
I thank the Lord for may his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Justice Simon.
Thank you. I also join my fellow panelists in commiserating with the Catholic fraternity throughout the world upon the loss of the Pope, a very distinguished individual, a person of humility, who loved humanity and had a passion for the poor and the downtrodden. He lived what he espoused. And indeed, he demonstrated that time and again sorry, by looking out for the poor and promoting a message of peace, unity, and forgiveness throughout the world. It's unfortunate, as Captain Mike Mkula has said, that the two leaders in South Sudan have not come to bring peace, forgiveness, and unity between themselves. Because I was watching a video footage last evening where he even bent or knelt down and kissed the feet of both men. That was very, very moving. If I were in their shoes, I would say, look, this person who has passed on, this act which he performed should be the rallying point for us to put aside our differences and work for peace for the people of Sudan. So we pray that God rest his soul in eternal peace. For Major Kazora, I must confess I did not have opportunity to interact with him closely. Apart from what I read about him, he was one of the people who contributed to the greatly to the liberation struggle in this country. He singled himself out as a leader who was consistent. He stood by what he said and lived what he said. I pass on my condolences to his family and friends and all his comrades. May God rest his soul in eternal peace.
Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. Our tribute to both the Pope, Pope Francis, and also the Honorable retired Major John Kazora. Our prayers go out to them, and the comfort to the Catholic, Roman Catholic Church, and also the family of the late there. Let's get into the gist of our conversation. At the tail end of last week, the Electoral Commission put out a press release and said it was rescheduling the release of the National Voters Register which is meant to come out on the 25th, which is Friday this week, to be able to tell us exactly how many people will be involved in the elections of 2026. This is very monumental because it tells us the number of people and also tells us exactly what the demographic looks like. But let me start with the justice, because this is your area of domain. The roadmap has been on course. A few hiccups, faulty machines, low turn-up, especially with the verification, but also with people updating their information there. We also know very well that Article 61 gives you the mandate to compile, to maintain, to update, but also most of all to make sure that our register is intact. Why was the display delayed for 2 months and 8 days, to be exact? Was it silence? Was it strategy? What was it exactly?
Thank you very much, Timothy, and listeners. Indeed, as you've enumerated, a number of activities in the roadmap have already been undertaken and concluded. Now, after the update process, which took place across the entire country, the Electoral Commission had to gather and retrieve all the data that was generated during the update exercise at every update center. We had to retrieve this data to the headquarters, and most of it was on paper, on paperwork. So we had to analyze, review this data, and then capture it, enter it into our system in order for us to come up with the display register. So the 2 months was not because of any glitch or hiccup or semblance of disorganization. It was because we were analyzing the data very carefully, capture it on our system. Then we have now produced the display register, which we are going to display at all the display centers, at all polling stations in the country, beginning with Friday, 25th of this month. So I want to assure the people of Uganda that the whole exercise is on course.
You were here, and I asked you a straight question about the display. You told me you were gathering information. Yeah. But I also saw a press release where you said 361,000 people were new voters. You also said 90,000 people were transferring, and you said you were waiting for students, information from NIRA about students. You haven't given us the number of polling stations yet. What is this information that you were releasing on Friday? What does it look like?
Well, first of all, the whole purpose of the update exercise, as I told the people of Uganda, was threefold. One, to enable all first-time voters who are eligible, or citizens of Uganda, 18 years and above, to apply to become voters at a designated polling station within the parish where they reside or originate. That is one. Two, to allow all those who wish to transfer their voting location to do so within that period. Three, during the registration of learners by NIRA at school or in the various schools or academic institutions, there were many who were not yet 18 years, but there were citizens 16 years, 17 years, who were also registered by NIRA as citizens. At that material time, they were not eligible voters because they had not yet turned 18. But in due course, by the time of the commencement of the update process, many had turned 18. So although NIRA had given them a NIN or an identity card and confirmed them as citizens, their voting location was not established because they did not qualify as voters at the time of registration. So the update exercise was to allow or to enable all these learners who are registered at school to approach or to come to the registration, to the update centers, and indicate their voting location. Where do you want to vote from? Is it in a place of your origin or residence? So that was a threefold exercise. Then also there are those who were vigilant. They said, no, even if I'm already a registered voter, I want to go and establish whether I am on the on the register of my polling station I voted from, although the time had not yet come for that process. But essentially, new voters, transfers, learners.
My last question before I come to Dr. Sarah. You said you will go by the 2014 census.
Yeah.
Why? 2, what information are you giving us on Friday? Because the demarcation was done. We don't know how many polling stations are there. How many people are going to vote? What information can you give us now to work with?
No, I think we have already established how many polling stations there are currently. They are in the range of 37,000 polling stations. And the information that we are going to issue, or that is going to be displayed at these polling stations, are the registered voters who indicated by themselves that my voting location or polling station is here or there. Now, the purpose of display, therefore, is to enable all Timothy, Andrew, Mike, Simon, everyone who is a registered voter to go and verify, 1, am I at this polling station where I indicated from the beginning I'm going to vote from, or where I voted from in 2021. Secondly, are my names properly spelled or correctly written or recorded? Thirdly, is my photograph on the register? And fourthly, am I in a polling station within reach of my home where I indicated, or has my name inadvertently been thrown elsewhere? So all these things are supposed to be taken. Then there also another crop of people who did, like the learners who did not indicate their voting location. And maybe during update, they were not able to come up and also tell us where they want to vote from. So we want also to give an opportunity to those Ugandans who might have been registered as voters, I mean as learners by NIRA, but were not able to indicate their voting location. Their names will be displayed at these polling stations within the polling station of the village where they indicated they either reside or originate from. So that's what we are going to be putting on display.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sarah, the justice said he will go by the 2014.
No, I do not respond to that. 2014.
2014.
2014, no.
And not 2024.
No, I think that is with regard to demarcation of local government electoral areas. Now, the people asked us that why are you going by the census results of 2014? When you look at the current results released by UBC, the population data is disaggregated to district level. For us to be able to carry out demarcations effectively for local government positions, we need data at sub-county level, we need data at parish level, and I think UBC explained that we'll be able to release the details, those details within 6 months from the period of releasing the current report. So the report has no, as long as those details have not been availed, EC therefore cannot carry out demarcation at those levels. That's why we are now using the 2014 UBC results, because we must do demarcation. It's a requirement of the law that before we go for any general election, we have to carry out demarcation.
A 10-year census that happened 10 years ago. Dr. Sarah, when you hear the submissions of the justice, what is your reading of this display of the National Voters Register come Friday, but in hindsight, what does this mean for our elections?
Well, first of all, the Electoral Commission has delayed on to display the register for about 2 months, maybe cleaning up data. And what comes to the mind of the citizen is what's the use of national database collected by NIRA. Should it or shouldn't it be helping in important national exercises like quickening up the harmonization of the voter register with the majority of Ugandans, especially adult Ugandans, having all their details captured in the NIRA register already through the national ID exercise? Why don't we have the government agencies speaking to each other to ease work, but also save taxpayers' money? The same applies to the issue of the census that you've asked our Lord, the Chair of the Electoral Commission. Under Article 59, on demarcation of constituencies, the EC is required to use census report for the first 12 months in a, harmonizing polling stations, harmonizing in case of any review of constituencies. And the Constitution, Article 59(5), presumes that actually the practice of creating new constituencies should happen only once in 10 years in this country. There has been abuse by Parliament, but they almost create new constituencies in every election. This is contrary to the spirit of the Constitution that requires a review, rearrangement of polling areas, including constituencies, once every 10 years within the first year of the census. So when we miss using the 2024 census to inform the data for 2026 elections, going strictly by the Constitution, the census then becomes irrelevant to the elections, because the provision is very clear. The first 12 months after publication of national census results. So when then you extend further to 2014 data, where does this article apply in our elections? Any data beyond 10 years statistically is outdated data. Even in research, you cannot refer to it. Data beyond 10 years is outdated. This is the data that is informing our elections. Why wouldn't government agencies speak to each other at the time of the census, table their demands to make sure that this data is disaggregated on time and extracted for purposes of informing the roadmap? Because there was an interagency committee of the census. So was this request put by the Electoral Commission to make sure this data is extracted faster and availed to inform the roadmap? And then what befalls of Article 59(5) of the Constitution? Away from that, there are challenges with the voter registration. In our election observation, under our broader theme of eyes on the ballot, we have a scorecard on elections and how we observe all activities of the elections. So under observation of voter registration, you need to look at aspects of eligibility to vote, number of registered voters vis-a-vis, like the census puts Ugandan adults 18 years and above at 23.15 million. Then you have the voter registration processes, how efficient it is, inclusivity and acceptability. Our roadmap excludes about 1 million eligible voters in the period of 1 year, because voter registration happens in January, February. So the Constitution provides that government agencies should do all it requires to ensure that all persons eligible to vote are enabled to vote. I know that for one to register to vote, you are required to be 18 years. But when you put registration 1 year before elections, you are excluding a whole generation of young people that are going to turn 18 in that period. We need to find ways of minimizing this defranchisation of young voters in this country. It's not fair. There is a contradiction on that provision in the Constitution. Anybody 18 years and above, state agencies must do all in their power to facilitate the exercise of voting of anybody 18 and above. How do we account for 1 million youth that are excluded in this longer period. I know that there are activities to do with special interest groups and the rest, but how do we minimize that damage of denying people exercising their sovereign rights when they are eligible to vote?
Okay.
So, but if you allow me briefly to talk about broadly the issues affecting generally the electoral roadmap and elections in the country, I don't know how prepared Justice Byabakama and his team are, because the other element we score under voter education is under voter registration is voter education. Usually by this time, we should be having a lot of voter education running on televisions, on media, you know, in all spaces. But apart from seeing one or two officials speaking from Electoral Commission, there is nobody doing voter education in this country. UBC is not running adverts for voter education. Any other media is not running. The independent CEO is here. I don't know whether he's running any work related to voter education. Civil society are not doing any work related to voter education. Why? Who is sensitizing voters on what is expected of them, including turning up to do what they are supposed to do for the voter display? Who are we organizing these elections for? Maybe I will come in with the other aspects of elections that are contentious.
Interesting, you say who are we organizing these elections for? Mr. Kanusu, when you hear what the justice has spoken and what Dr. Sarah said, do you have confidence in the display of this national register, especially working with data of 10 years ago, which means then the population was 34 million, which means then we had about 200 members of parliament, who are now 529. Those are more constituencies. Do you have confidence in this process?
Thank you very much for that question. And I remember when you were introducing me, you introduced me as a peace and conflict analyst. And my role as an expert in that area is not to escalate conflict. It is to de-escalate conflicts. So from that background, allow me to tell you one thing, that election is not a new thing in Uganda. It has been on. And remember, we had the background of since 1962 to 1962 to date, with a lot of episodes in Uganda's history. And you remember very well that during 1985, we got a major change, a shift, which with the revolution, which was violent, leading us into the dispensation that we have right now of governance. And what I can only say is that using timely data is very important. But the circumstances, as Justice and Chairman has just mentioned, they should be having some challenges that are leading to them to reverse to 2014 data. And yet Article 61.1, it talks more about data, voter data, which is very important. But largely, allow me to speak from the deductive logic aspect of it, is that generally elections are supposed to be organized in a harmonious way. As the CEO representative is talking, Dr. Bilete, we need to have the stakeholder engagement. Or are we engaging the stakeholders? Are we sensitizing enough our people? Are they on board? Largely what we have been seeing is a situation where candidates take lead in carrying out the voter sensitization. Largely, candidates. Right now they are hungry for information. They need to get information and have something to tell their voters. And as justice has come, this show is being watched by a large spectrum of people because it is timely and they expect the panelists on this panel to give the right information. I see that what is happening right now, we need to address the key issues that the voters need to have at this time, as the Electoral Commission also prepares for the other issues to do with sensitization, awareness, legal preparedness, how to address issues to do with voter eligibility and mobility. All those become key. And you cannot differentiate a large population of the young men who have become eligible voters today, at this time, because of a deficiency in engaging some stakeholders in this process. In this case, I'm talking about Uganda Bureau of Statistics. We need to really sit. There's nothing that can be late forever. It's not late yet. Government, Electoral Commission can still engage the UBOS, use the same data, update it, and then come up with the right voter data, which is required. That can lead us to a free and fair election for 2026 without necessarily leaving members doubting the process, doubting the system used in coming up to this election, because it will have a legal implication at the end of the post-election issues will always come up.
Before I get to Andrew, something Dr. Sarah mentioned, government institutions failing to synergize. You as the Deputy RCC, you are a public servant. Why are you failing to put your energies together, to synchronize, to give us something that is clean, credible, and Ugandans can have confidence in?
Indeed, we can't say we have failed. It's about late preparation.
He has just referred to a census of 2014, 10 years ago, excluding 11 million Ugandans. We had 200 members of parliament then. We have 529 now. Are you confident that this register is a reflection of the Ugandans ready to vote?
I would wish that the chairman sheds more light on this, because there should be a reason. There must be a root cause to all this. But there should also be a solution to it.
But you
and to me,
are a representation of the president in Mbarara. Aren't you as the RCC?
Yes, I am.
So if you're not giving confidence to the people there to go to the polling station, who should?
Let me tell you, election is not for tomorrow, it's a process. And we are discussing a process of an event that will happen next year in February, I mean, around from January to February. There is time to really patch up and come up with the standard data required, because your concern is more about the data, eligibility, mobility of the voters, those who could have switched their places of residence from one area to another. This can be really harmonized, and I know it is not too late, but I think, as I requested, since we have the whole chairman present, my elder, my super leader in that, and that's expert in that, I think we gave him a benefit of doubt to explain it first before us look into what it is, because we may be hitting below the belt when he has all the solution for what you are addressing. So I think you give chairman more time to really finish up on this matter. Then we can debate, we can discuss fairly on the matter, because the chairman is around. We don't want to discuss in a vacuum when he's here.
Let me get to the grandfather of the country. Andrew, you have been a journalist, you have observed elections, you have seen elections, not just Uganda, East Africa, the region, and observed them globally. When you hear this national register being displayed, and you look in hindsight of our electoral processes in the last few years, what does it tell you?
Actually, I'm going to give you a political economic explanation of why Uganda's data about citizens is in silos. But before you go there, you said, given my advanced age of 112 years now, and given my global experience.
And being that you preach to us.
Yes. And given my wide experience, I'll give you just one example. In 2002, I was sponsored by the United Nations jointly with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany to go as an election observer to the German election. It was being contested between the Gerhard Schroeder and Joschka Stoiber. This one was CDU, the other one was SDP. So I spent 43 days in Germany following all these elections, dined with the leader of the opposition, dined with the chancellor, and all other political party leaders. I think the leader of the Communist Party was called Gizi, the leader of the Green Party was called Joschka Fischer, and the following things I noted. In Germany, they have one central registry, which is what you'd call the equivalent of NIRA here. So every citizen who is born is registered. Everyone who is naturalized as a citizen, if you come from outside and you become a citizen, you are registered there. If you die, they register you. So all information is done there. They issue a birth certificate, they issue a citizenship registration certificate, or they issue a death certificate. Now, as part of our election observatory role, we were provided this information. So when you turn 18, you receive a letter in your post office from the equivalent of NIRA saying, Timothy Nyangweso, you have turned 18 and therefore eligible to vote. I have always wondered, why does Uganda have, you don't need an election register. You need a citizenship registration, that's NIRA. They can have an interface at the Electoral Commission so that anyone, because if you turn 18 the day before the election, your information is with NIRA. You just go with your national ID and the date of your birth. You don't need to register me, assuming I turn 18 a week before the election or the day before the election. I'm not a registered voter. So I personally would suggest for government of Uganda broadly to end these silos so that you have the institution that offers national ID, the institution that issues passports, the institution that issues voter, you don't need a voter registration card, you just need national ID, the Electoral Commission, the people who issue driver's licenses, the people who issue your NEB numbers. All these things can be on one platform. So if you are UNEB, you can log on and be able to see students and follow that way. If you are issuing a passport, you can, at immigration, you can log on to that platform. If you are Electoral Commission, you can log on to that platform and know these are the voters available and this is the number of polling stations I need given the concentration of these voters in the particular areas. So if you're issuing driver's licenses, you also log on Ministry of Transport from the same portal. You don't need to have these silos. Electoral Commission has its own data. UNEB has its own data. NIRA has its own data. UBOS has its own data. Everybody has their own data.
Of the same person?
Of the same person. Why do you fragment it? So I'm coming now to the political economy of Uganda. This is also based on my experience as, first of all, as a journalist, two, as a politically, or let me say, a civic conscious human being, but also third, as a very old man. The political economy of Uganda is this, that you see the allocation of tenders and contracts to supply some of these services is contested by different fragments of the state. So the Electoral Commission, they want to have their own control. Because if you do a voter registration and all these biometrics, there is money there to be made. The people who are doing procurement, they will make their money. The ones who are doing it at NIRA are also cashing in on it. Driver's licenses, passports, too much. And in the process, it becomes difficult for the state of Uganda to create one central place because you are eliminating so many hands from the till of pillaging the state. That is the source of the incompetence. So I leave that one there. That I think the fragmentation of the state leads to interested parties want to control resources at a small level. So what may be individually beneficial to these people is nationally inefficient for the country in terms of data processing. So I want for me to come to the issue of voter education. I should tell you, by the way, I do not believe in voter education. Voter education assumes that there is a council of smart people who need to educate voters on what to do. Please, people, remember, the Constitution of Uganda says people are supreme. The citizens are supreme. Am I correct? They're sovereign. It assumes, the idea of democracy assumes
they own the sovereign.
Yes.
They are the sovereign.
Citizen is informed about their rights. If they're not informed about their rights, then you cannot have a democracy. So we have a democracy because citizens should be informed. Now, if there are gaps of information, they're interested parties. And this brings me to the NRM and the opposition parties. If you're NRM, it is in your interest to educate voters on how to vote, on when the day of the election is, and all these processes. The state should not take that role. Maybe Sarah Virete, my great-granddaughter, could be interested because she's a civil society person and an activist. She may feel like she has an obligation to society or the church to do this. But I don't feel like the government should be involved in it. But the political parties who are interested should do that. One of the problems I find with the, let me ignore NRM. NRM has the infrastructure of the state, which allows it to punch above, far above its weight. But I see the opposition. If you look at the last election of 2021, The largest concentration of voters in Uganda are actually in Wakiso and Wakiso and Kampala districts. So Kampala had 1.3 million registered voters. I'm rounding off, it must have been 1.29. Okay. Wakiso had 1.2. Between them, they had 2.5 million voters. If you know Uganda's politics, you know that people who are in urban areas, who are educated, and they are the most hostile to the NRM. So if you are the leader of the opposition, you are Bobby Wine, it is in your interest not only to conduct massive campaign, sensitization campaign in Kampala and Wakiso because of 2.5 million votes, but also to mobilize your base on that day to go to the polling station. Now, of the 1.3 million registered voters of Kampala, and the chairman of the Electoral Commission is here, can confirm for me, voter turnout in Kampala was 43%. 43. About 550,000 out of 1.3 million. So if your base is not showing up to vote, and then you say that they stole your votes, something must be happening in your mind. If you look at that election in Kampala, Bobby Wine got about 384,000 votes, Museveni got a paltry 126,000. So even if you multiplied Museveni's votes 3 times, he will not reach the number of Bobby Wine. So assuming Bobby Wine had mobilized 90% of Kampala to show up and vote, so he got 90% of the vote, he would have had 1 million. Now let me tell you about other regions. If you take the whole of northern region, rather the whole of Acholi region, total registered voters, if I'm not mistaken, let me remember, the total number of registered voters in Acholi region was 710,000. In West Nile, 1.2 million. In Lango, 1 million. In Karamoja, 330. So 3.2 million. Almost the same as Kampala and Wakiso. Just Kampala and Wakiso alone, if these people mobilize it seriously. But also remember that voter turnout in the northern region was 58%. It was very low. And I think it's because of the absence of message from the ballot paper. The people in the north were not willing to vote for Bobby Wine. But if you look at Buganda, which is Bobby Wine's stronghold, voter turnout was 55%. Out of 5.64 million registered voters, only 3 million showed up to vote. So this tells us something. And when I talk to these opposition people, I know they really, really hate me because yet I think I'm the ally. I'm giving them the best information. Please, 2 things. If you look at, again, his numbers, Simon Hill, bear with me. Although there are 1.3 million registered voters in Kampala and 1.2 million registered voters in Wakiso, the registration of youth in these 2 districts was very low. If I'm not mistaken, the older people registered heavily, but the youth registration was below 60% or something like that. I have that number, I can't find it. It was very low. But if you look at the voting patterns in Uganda, the older people are, the more they're likely to vote NRM and Museveni. The younger people are, people below 35 are likely to vote the opposition, and they're the largest number. You have very low registration rates in the demographic segment that is your base. And I think that one of the things that has killed this country, killed the opposition and undermined the drive for democracy, is that the opposition have convinced themselves that they win every election, but Museveni steals their votes. So if you convince yourself that you have won, therefore your challenge is not that you have not mobilized your base to register. You have not mobilized your base to turn out and vote. So you are living in a lie. Okay. So what happens with this voter registration is, your supporters, it is in the interest of NRM and the other political parties to actually mobilize people to show up and register. It is also in the interest to mobilize them to show up and vote. It is also in the interest to be the ones driving this voter education. If they're not doing it, why are they expecting Santa Claus to come and do it for them? I rest my case.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mike Mukula, you released a roadmap of the NRM and gave us 20 million members. But if we are to reduce that number to bring it down to people who are eligible to vote in your system, they could be between 16 and 18 million, numbers that might be competing with the numbers of the justice there. When you look at this display that is going to happen on Friday and our voting patterns in this country, why has the National Resistance Movement not guaranteed that we have a clean bill of health in our data?
Well, first of all, you've got to understand, let me give you the framework of the power and the sovereign, the power of the people to exercise their sovereignty, and to say that the provisions of the Article 1 midwifed the governance structure and the will of the people. This is a very important component that drives elections in Uganda. Uganda is now trying to, first of all, this is about maybe the 5th major election, or so, the 6th, coming to the 6th election that we are exercising in the country from 1996. And in order to have this for the listeners to capture clearly, you've got to understand that in order to have a clean and effective elections, you need to have a legal framework that they do have, we do have, for internal democracy. 2, the institutional framework that the Independent Electoral Commission has. Then the other third point, which is also very crucial in this, is the political will. The political will means that you must enable and finance and ensure that the Independent Electoral Commission has all the enabling environment, the capacity to conduct elections in a free and fair atmosphere environment. In order to have that and to ensure that you oversee the provisions of the Constitution being exercised effectively, you must have the Fourth Estate involved, right from the beginning and all the way. The Fourth Estate, the media, Andrew Mwenda, and the team must be fully in gear. And that's why I say that civic society comes in now. And that's why my sister, Sarah Birete, comes in. Civil society is very crucial. And in performing with the civil society, you now bring in a very important provision, which is ensuring that you have electoral observers. They could be local, regional, and international. This is the whole hallmark of elections that are carried out in East Africa and also Uganda. But let me say that in all this, you've got to make sure that there's civic education. That's what Sarah Birete was trying to labor on. Civic education. Because if you don't have civic education, you've had a provision where, for example, if you looked at the provisions that the Chairman Justice has been able to elucidate on, you'll note that 2026, from the last elections we conducted, 2021, they had an electoral register of 18 million voters. 18 million voters now, when you look at the current register and those that have come in, you have approximately 22 million voters that have come in, 22 million. Meaning that there has been a metamorphosis, an evolution of another 4 million voters. Why? Uganda is one of the youngest nations in the world. And you know that approximately 30% of the population of Uganda is below the age of, about 80% of the population of Uganda is below the age of 30 years. So you have a young population. And that's why you find that most of the time the chairman of the Electoral Commission, security, has a problem managing the violence, which is characterized by most third world elections, most of Uganda. A young population, not fully educated, no civic education carried out effectively, and no direction. This is the challenge the chairman of the Electoral Commission was talking about. Now, in all this, security comes in. So you have 37 new polling stations which have come in from 34. So it means that the space for elections in this country has widened. When you reflect this with the National Resistance Movement register, that's why I wanted you to capture and look at this and listen to this very carefully. The NRM electoral register is close to about 20 million. A number of these are young children, young people. We have, in our internal democratic process, we have now introduced biometric. I wrote an article in New Vision 3 days ago. If you read it, you'll understand that this provision that we have introduced by the guidance of His Excellency the President, and we have invested substantial amount in ensuring that we have a clean register, because elections start from, first of all, internal democratic stimuli, the way we conduct our internal elections, which then midwife the candidates, what you call the flag bearers, from the president all the way to fill all these electoral positions that you have. The national resistance movement, therefore, in responding to your question, has tended to have, one, a clean register.
Why isn't that translated to the EC?
Well, you see, first of all,
because Honorable Captain Mike Mukula, you have served in government as a minister. You are the national vice chairperson. You sit on SEC, but we still have silos and people working individually, like Andrew has been saying. Immigration has its own, NERA has its own, driver's licenses. What point of your amalgamation of your data as a party, why is that failing for us as a country? Why are you not doing it in power?
No, if you look at our elections, if you look at our electoral register, we have provisioned an arrangement where internally every registered voter in our registry, in our voter bank, has the NIN, National Identification Number. You cannot go in, apart from that NIN, you must also be captured with a biometric database. The question is, we have interfaced with the National Register, or the NIN, in order to ensure that our register is clean, and that is verified with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I think, and I will not speak for Electoral Commission because the chairman is here, who is an able spokesman for the Independent Electoral Commission. I think now we have come a long way from 1996, when the Electoral Commission then had in its provisions register of voters which was not verified. And that's why you find that it was easier for you to challenge these provisions in courts of law. And that's why I'm saying that to cure this now, we are capturing data in order to cure and ensure that you carry out what you call free and fair elections. You can never have a perfect election anywhere in the world, but free and fair election, which is reflective of the provisions of the Constitution.
Thank you very much. Let me read some feedback so that we take a break. Hello, Timothy. My name is Sam from Walukuba in Jinja. Thank you for bringing the panel. I'd like to ask Kada Kanusu, what greatly motivated him to move from UPC to the NRM, where he dwelt on truth? Can he imagine himself cleaning up the lies, especially with the methods that are corrupt in the system? Poverty is ruining us, and we're weak. I was your campaign agent one time in Molukuba, but I remain in farm poverty. Okay, I hope you respond to that one. Chris here says, I'm in Njeru municipality. My national ID I got it from Chadondo in Nabugabo sub-county, but I want to stand as a leader in my home area. Will I be allowed to stand there? Okay. This is Bernard Mugisha asking the EC chair, why is the EC taking long to pay supervisors? Okay. This is Ndugu Evaristo. Extends my appreciation to the panelists making time to share. And I have two questions. With all the blackmail and intimidation by political parties, such as the ones named there, please comfort us that you will perform your duties without fear or favor. Secondly, okay, someone asks about the registration of PFF. Thank you, Timothy, for the show. Timothy, thank you for the show. This is Semanda from Fort Portal. Thank you for the program and assembling an informed panel. He goes on to say, if NIRA has our data, it should be accessed by all agencies, immigration's UCC, just like the computer links the mouse and the fingerprint. It's surprising when you reach Entebbe Airport and immigrations is asking you for your national ID. Interesting. Lastly, before we take a break, my question goes to Justice. Are you comfortable with the continued disenfranchisement of certain sections of Ugandans in the diaspora? I'm aware it is not entirely their fault that the Electoral Commission, but to what extent will they engage in voting? This section of Ugandans need to exercise their vote, and is it possible to happen before the general elections? This is Julius Ankunda. Okay.
Just allow me one simple
Yes.
clarification. I referred to Article 63.5 on the requirement to use data within the first 12 months of the census. By error, I mentioned 59.5. It's 63.5.
Thank you very much for that clarity. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, the Justice will be mentioning some few things, but also we'll dig in hindsight of 2021 elections, Kawempe. What does that mean for us moving forward? This and more.
It's super fast internet. Oh, it's a super camera. It's a super battery.
Fun battery phone.
Yeah, it's a super deal. Get the Capote Super from MTN now at a reduced initial deposit of only 49,000 shillings and pay the balance in Pola for as low as 833 shillings per day. Grab this Super Capote deal and get 2 GB of free MTN data every month for 8 months. Get the Capote Super now from any MTN shop countrywide. Everywhere you go, MTN. Regulated by UCC.
The government's core mandate is to maintain law and order, safeguard citizens' rights, and provide essential public services.
Remember, one of the pillars of a roadmap is innovation and entrepreneurship.
There has been this question of how are you protecting our indigenous seed?
It's going to be a tall project. That answers somebody's question.
For the past 20 weeks, the front bench has brought you insightful discussions on governance, security, healthcare, justice, and commerce.
When you go through this complicated procedure, involve the lawyers, you bring the case against him, the judge will hear you out and pass judgment, and you're out of court in record time.
We remain committed to keeping you informed and engaged on key national matters.
So these are huge, these are powerful organizations which now Uganda chairs. Why don't you come together?
If we haven't migrated to the e-card because of various reasons, including that not all the people of Uganda have smartphones.
You can sit in your house, apply for a passport. If you have a Ugandan who has a successful logistics firm in the US, it means he can come to Uganda and do a lot more.
Now airing every Monday at 8:30 p.m. with me, Jethro Kasaiji, your interface with the government only on your public broadcaster, UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Maskari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown uncover the untold and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. The conversation seems to continue, but the things that happen behind the scenes will not come on air. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Birete, who is the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance, but also an election observer. I'm also joined by Mr. Kanusu Robert, who is the Deputy RCC in Mbara, but also a conflict and peace analyst. The old man of the clan, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, CEO of the Independent Magazine. I'm also joined by Captain, Grandfather of the Nation, Honorable Captain Mike Mukula, National Vice Chairperson, Eastern Region of the National Resistance Movement, and His Lordship Justice Simon Byabakama, the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission. We're discussing the display of the National Voters Register, but also vis-a-vis the elections and what that means for us. We are online. We're streaming live on X, so you can get there and drop your comment. Let us know what you think. Also, the number 0709 60 25 92. Let us know what you think. Let's get into this conversation. Justice, let me come to you. I'll come to Andrew, something and each he tickled that he'll have to respond to. Some of the things you need to respond to that you had here, but also why should Ugandans have confidence in the register you're going to put out? Vis-a-vis, you're talking about parish tribunals. What are their terms of reference, and do you have faith in them?
Thank you. I'll start with the latter question you have raised. Whatever the Electoral Commission does is ingrained in the law. The law says that at display, if Timothy identifies a name on the register of a voter who is either dead or a non-citizen or below 18 years, you raise a red flag to the display officer and say, this person, as far as I know, is not eligible or is dead. And that information is captured on a form. At the end of the display process, all this information generated from the polling stations in that parish will be forwarded to the parish tribunal. That is also a legal requirement. The parish tribunal is set up by the magistrate and is composed of 2 elders from the area and 2 representatives as identified of political parties and so on. So the tribunal scrutinizes the recommendations emanating from the polling stations. And if they confirm or verify that indeed the information is correct, because these are ordinarily people within that locality, within that parish or that locality. So they know if Samson so and so passed on, they are bound to know. Now, they will therefore forward the recommendations or confirm the objection and recommend to the returning officer or to the Electoral Commission that indeed these recommended deletions should be carried out or implemented. And that's when we can delete the name of a voter after this due process. So in my view, this is a hallmark of transparency. It's a hallmark of in making sure that the register is credible, is clean, verifiable, and ascertainable. So
How
it
do
is
you
within
ensure
the
that they're not compromised?
compromise. Well, Andrew, I mean, sorry, not Timothy, that is the $64,000 question. But we hope, that's why we insist that the tribunal should comprise of 2 elders and people of integrity who have been identified from the communities to be part of this panel or to be part of this tribunal. Now, on the issue of the data, let me make one clarification. UBOS captures, I think, everyone, every living being or living person, be it babies, be it what, and so on and so forth, okay? And Therefore, UBC is entitled in their mandate to register every living human being. But Electoral Commission only registers 18-year-olds who are citizens in the country. Now, the citizenship database is with NIRA. The law permits the Electoral Commission to utilize or to access the NIRA data and identify those Ugandans who have been registered by NIRA, issued with a NIN or an ID, and have indicated their votability, that they are willing voters. You know, voting in Uganda is not mandatory. It's optional. It is discretional. So you may go to NIRA and you seek to be registered as a citizen and get a national ID, because there are so many things you have to can only transact by having a national ID. Now, you may, if you don't indicate on that form that you are willing to vote from a particular polling station, NIRA will not stop from registering you as a citizen or giving you a NIN or a national ID. However, for Electoral Commission, when we access that data, we shall not capture you or import you as a voter onto the National Voters Register. Why? Because you not indicate that you're a willing voter. So that is a fundamental difference. But on Sonajizing, I want to assure you that we do work closely with NIRA. Now, on the issue of the number of voters and the young population, disenfranchisement of a particular number of a particular group, you see, you cannot. One of the reasons I think the framers of the law were cognizant of the fact that there has to be a time when you have to stop registering voters, so as to have an ascertainable register. If you continue registering voters, because remember, there is a Ugandan turning 18 every other day, even on polling day, even on the eve of polling day. Now, if you make a registration of voters endless up to polling, what kind of register are you going to have? You have a moving, fluid register. How do you plan to print ballot papers? How do you plan for the number of polling stations? Because the number of polling stations is determined by the number of voters. How do you plan? How do you budget in the first instance? What register are you going to give to political parties at the time of nomination? Because the law says at the time of nomination, we have to issue political parties registers for them to get seconders or nominators or supporters of their candidates. For the presidential candidates, the law is that they should have signatures of about 50 supporters from every 2/3 of districts. How do you get those numbers if you don't have the register? So that's why the makers of the law made it in such a way that the Electoral Commission shall have a cut-off date for registration of voters. And mind you, most people focus on the elections under Article 61, Clause 2, which come in January to February and so on. That is presidential, parliamentary, and local government. But we have elections of special interest groups, which start much earlier, for the simple reason that these special interest groups, the youth, persons with disabilities, the older persons, their elections start at village level, they go to parish, sub-county, district, then they merge with the national elections. So for you, therefore, and according to the roadmap which I have here, those elections are scheduled for June of this year. That means, therefore, Timothy and listeners, that by June of this year, we must have a ready, ascertainable, verified register. The register that we are going to use for the special interest groups elections is the same register that is going to be used for the elections under Article 61, Clause 2, for presidential, parliamentary, and local government. So therefore, we have to get another cut-off date so that we complete the processes that are necessary, that are pertinent, that are statutory with regard to having clean register. Because if you continue registering up to December, when will you display the register? Because the law says you must display the register. So that's why we want the people of Uganda to understand that that provision was not merely meant to disenfranchise. The voters who will turn 18 after we have cut off registration of voters. It's for good planning. You know elections in this country. The moment you have a very uncertain register, wow, there will be fire all over the place. They're already trying to cheat. Why can't we know the number of voters? Why are they keeping the register growing time and again? So, and then the other matter that probably I wanted to clarify is on the issue of voter education. Yes, voter education is very paramount. But as I think the old man has said, or Sarah or Kanusu has said, that look, before you talk of voter education, are the citizens aware of their rights? Do they appreciate the power of their vote? As Mike has said, do the citizens appreciate the import, the significance of Article 1 of the Constitution, which says all power belongs to the people and shall be exercised in accordance with the Constitution? And the Article 1 again goes to say that the people shall exercise their right by choosing through their will and consent how they should be governed, who should govern them, and how they should be governed through the conduct of regular, free, and fair elections. That is the power of the sovereignty of the people. But do the people understand under Article 1? But do the people appreciate that? And therefore one can say civic education is the foundation of voter education. Because voter education is about, you look, go and register. Go and cast your vote in this manner. Go and attend campaign rallies. But the people have not, this is what we have realized, the people seem not to have realized the import, the significance of their sovereignty under Article 1. And that's why many of them have reduced their votes to a piece of kabalagala, 1,000 shillings, I pay you, you vote for me. Sugar, a sacket of salt, a piece of soap, because the people's sovereignty has not been recognized or appreciated. We need to do that by conducting robust civic education before we can even talk of voter education.
I'm going to come back to you on that. Mr. Kanusu, let me come to you. Let me first get Dr. Sarah Reid. Dr. Sarah, when you look at the 2021 elections and you look at November 2020, more than 50 people lost their lives. Every electoral cycle, the electoral violence, because we have to have the end in mind. We're discussing a display, but it is for the election. Every year, every electoral cycle, the violence escalates. The tenets of free, fair, credible election, are they a reality or a fallacy in 2026? In your view?
I think in Uganda, every upcoming election is unfortunately worse than the previous. We shall be having the 7th election under the 1995 Constitution. 1996 was still the best election. Ugandans can recall about 2001 violence started with the emergence of Dr. Kizza Besigye on the scene. So from 2001, the trends of violence have been on the increase. Also, the negative trends of excessive use of money in elections or commercialization of politics have also been on a steady increase. So these two trends, as we speak today, they seem to be the determinants of elections in Uganda. Either you have too much money to use to bribe the voters, but also capacity to unleash violence, intimidate those that don't support you, torture. We degenerated into abductions in 2021 after the November 18th, 19th massacre on Kampala streets that has never been accounted for. So as citizens out there excited about elections, look at the spectacle we are treated to in Kawempe. About 30 members in a small urban constituency with one member driving through a polling station. The violence that started right at nomination with brutalized attacks against members of the fourth estate all journalists clobbered on voting day, bundled into drones. The NBS photographer, his son, was just resumed work today, just because he appeared to be on duty in Kawempe. Is that an election that warrants excitement? Or it's a nation scared of more chaos, more death, and a messed up exercise? To make matters worse, and it's good we have the chair of the Electoral Commission. After all that we witnessed in Kawempe, then came the last stroke, the variations in the results. Electoral Commission goes before the cameras in Makerere, before all the observers and actors, announces results, only for them to gazette a different result. Did they go in the dark and start counting again? Really, what was that? Whereas you could excuse them of the violence, what explanation do they have for counting and announcing results in broad daylight and turning around and gazetting a different result altogether? Did the counting continue? Or you become factors official after that declaration and you lose powers to count? Then why would people, what comes in the mind of the citizen? The brutality of security officers. Article 61 of the Constitution clearly stipulates the functions of the Electoral Commission. Under Sub-Article 1, Electoral Commission has a function to ensure that they conduct regular, free and fair elections. I think in the 30 years of the 1995 Constitution, the only aspect we have achieved is the regular aspect. Yes, it's on record. The Supreme Court has ruled on 3 occasions that our elections, and it's good the Lord Justice is a member of the judiciary, going by the 3 Supreme Court decisions where these elections have been put to test, the Supreme Court has held that they fall short of the standards laid out in the Constitution at all the 3 times they have been tested. So that's the precedent that we use as citizens. The second function is to organize, conduct, and supervise elections. And of course, I want to mention the one that the old man of the clan talked about. Among the several functions is to conduct, to execute voter education programs and conduct them, among their key functions in the Constitution. So when we have an exercise on elections, citizens assume that the superior entity is the Electoral Commission. And this is because of the framing of the Constitution. Any person, entity, authority that comes to do a service regarding elections should work under the supervision and authority of the Electoral Commission, meaning that the Electoral Commission should guide all actors, should raise the red flag where people are disrupting elections, like the army. But what do we witness in most occasions, and when members of the Electoral Commission have been tasked to explain what's happening, they usually hide behind the excuse that security has power to do their work. Yet it's obvious that security comes in to disrupt the elections, arrest people, beat them to and from nomination centers, including the brutality of the FDC candidate during presidential elections. So we do not have an authoritative referee and supervisor in these elections that raises a flag for all actors. And this is why our elections are a mess. When you look at the state of the political parties as key actors in elections, failure to register the PFF since August last year, failure to gazette the new constitution. These delays affect the preparations and functioning of these parties. And it also violates the rights of citizens as enshrined under Article 72 of the Constitution, freely participating in politics and governance through political parties of their choice. What explains the failure? August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, to verify a simple request for a party to register. Is the Electoral Commission understaffed? Is it incapacitated? What explains the failure to gazette NUP Constitution for more than 2 years? Why?
Okay.
And how are these actors supposed to act? Lastly, as a civil society, we also have grievances. Electoral Commission, in the last elections, accredited civil society actors were arrested at a venue not far from here, at Hotel Africana. In the course of conducting work they were accredited to do. I was on the scene of the crime. 28 members of our group were arrested, detained for 3 days, reported to police for 6 months, case dismissed with no explanation. We got 2 contradicting information. Police said the request to arrest us was from Electoral Commission that had accredited us. Electoral Commission says it is police that arrested us. Up to now, we don't know what happened. Just last year in August, the Commission issued a call for agencies, individuals, and institutions who have resources, who want to participate in voter education. We have been doing this for every election, complementing the work of civic education, get materials for voter education from EC and publicize them. We applied to do the same work because we are registered to do civic education broadly. Up to now, we've not heard from the Electoral Commission. And guess who we heard from? Crime Intelligence of Police. So we are coming from the situation of 2021 unexplained. Now you apply to do voter education and you get a call from police. People who arrested you without explanation. It sends a very bad omen. And Mr. Chair, the feeling is not good within the sector.
Let me come to Mr. Kanusu.
Critical issues, sir,
you're going to respond to them, Chair.
Okay.
Let me get to the panel here so that
when the iron is still hot.
Mr. Kanusu, you as a deputy RCC, Andrew gave numbers, especially for the urban centers, voter apathy, people not showing up to vote. Let's even get to the closest, Kawempe. 190,000 people, only 13% showed up to vote. Ugandans are scared to come out to vote because of the fear of the security or the mayhem that could be put upon them. You, as an RCC, lead security. Why the high-handedness? And why has it gradually grown to where it is now?
Thank you very much, brother. Allow me to begin with the caller or one who wrote a message from Jinja, attaching me to the past life, which I see as a missed call. When I left UPC and joined NRM. Of course, a human being grows, and as you grow, you're expected to develop. These are 2 different things, to grow and to develop. When I developed, it means that I have gone through the stages of human development. And allow me, as a new panelist on this big panel of the super leaders of this nation, to say that a human being may grow when he's not developing. For me, I look at the human development model with due respect to that friend of mine who was my campaign manager during the past times. I look at the human development in this form, and it's going to help me to harmonize most of the issues being raised by the panelists here of my elders. Human development is defined as the process of discovering opportunity, giving opportunities, and enhancing capabilities. Doctor knows it well, that when people grow, there are 7 principles which must be universally accepted. And this is what is going to help us resolve the riddle about elections. Because when Ugandans talk about a certain issue at a certain stage, they get diverted from all the other things. If Kawempe comes, they talk about Kawempe, all the media houses. Even when Parliament sits and is talking pertinent issues there and passing a lot of bills and what of it, the people's mind is stuck on Kawempe elections. They are not even knowing that the state is moving on, the whole system is moving. They only think it's about Kawempe. Now human development stands on 7 pillars. Allow me to go through them briefly. One of them is knowledge acquisition. Relating it to the topic, what kind of knowledge do people have, do people want in the electoral processes? Even these people, so-called civil society, what kind of sensitization do they give people? Is it opposition-oriented information about elections? Yes, we know there is fatigue, election fatigue. Issues that are not resolved from one election to another elections. Some of the issues you are raising to my chairman here could have happened in the past elections and were known, they were not addressed, a solution was not got to them. But here he finds himself, he has to manage another election. Doctor is saying it. Now, knowledge acquisition leads us to standards of living. They all lead to what I'm going to say. Decent standards of living as the second pillar of human development. The third one is social equity and social justice. There is human rights. There is the issue of sustainable environment management. The sixth one is the issue of participation in the political and community life. And then the last one is living a good life. There are 7 pillars. Now, when we come to Article 61, if you want to look at it critically and address the futures that shape a free and fair election that we deserve, all the other factors have to be looked into. You saw the man talking about livelihood, poverty. All these translate into elections. And some people come into an election without really holistically looking at the universally accepted human development pillars. Now, let me come to it. Opposition, which I know very well, because I was there, he has mentioned it, and later on truncated to NRM, where I know that all wise men work with government, work for government, participate in development of their state, using government machinery. Me, I could not be exclusive of that. I wanted also to be part of the government machinery because all wise men, they even do interviews through public service to get in there. Well, in opposition, you can walk in, whether you have Ndagamuntu or not, you wake up and say, I'm opposition member, they will never ask you. They will never, the eligibility is just open.
Okay.
Whether you have this and
Kanusu,
now.
Let's come back to the gist of the question.
Brother, I'm coming to the gist of the question.
Because we are running short of time.
Opposition has been, yes, I'm coming to the security question. You asked me my role, our role, the role of the Office of Security Officers. Opposition has always perennially lived on these 3 things. Lies, always talking for sympathy, talking for provocation, which leads to violence and hooliganism. I know when opposition calls a rally, they tell them, can you please follow the Political Organizations Act? Can you seek for permission? Can we know where your meeting, notification, can we know where your meeting is going to be? How you have prepared for it? They will always stay in lies, sympathy and provocation, and it leads to violence and hooliganism. You get it? Well, government's reaction on the other side is always hides in security. We have blocked this procession, we have blocked this meeting for security reasons. Explanations can come later. Second, why do you block the opposition? Can you understand this?
And not block the NRM?
I'm coming to that. It talks about intimidation. Madam Birete is talking about intimidation of opposition and all that follow. But there is also the law. What does the law say? Holistically, what does it talk about? What you are provoking, what you are countering with hooliganism. Would they just look on? Then there is also the economics. We know of some opposition members who do their provocation purposely because there's an economics behind it. Some will even tell you, America would be behind us. And you say, which America? Is it because you just go and visit and think when you come back here, America is thinking about it, they don't have their domestic problem to think about? Now, civil society, no, I'm not getting off track. I'm stuck on my reason. I mean on the question that was addressed. Now, me as a conflict analyst, let us, how can we organize credible, violence-free elections? How can we avoid the fatigues that have always reoccurred and keep on reoccurring as being raised? I know that there are a lot of reforms that have been proposed. I don't know how far my Honorable Minister for Justice, Honorable Robert Mao, has really gone on with tabling the reforms as required. Because even remember in the last election, 2016, when Amama Mbabazi, Honorable, went to court, and a lot of proposals were really raised up. How can, first, where have all the members of parliament, in parliament, opposition members, been to really push for these reforms to happen?
Okay. Mr.
And
Kanusu,
now elections have come, they're talking about them currently. I would think that the question of livelihood, largely the people's sovereignty, that's what I'm coming to. The quality of the citizens determines the quality of actions they make, whether in elections, whether taking which decision. When you have people who are well off, when people who are doing well, that's why you see NRM giving people the PDM program to help them get acquainted to the finance equation. Because lastly, it translates into the decisions they make even during elections, the way they think, and they are even a large community that takes advantage of the ignorance, of the poor livelihood of the people, to give information which you regard as voter information sometimes, or civic education, which is really skewed purposely to lead them off the track. So for us, as people in government assigned to really monitor government programs, to look at security situations, maintain and help guide the community, we see that the qualities of communities really matter. And that's why you see that the important people, the elites, are running out. Their enthusiasm to participate in taking political decisions through elections and democracy is dying out. Because hooligans are taking over.
Thank you. Let me come to the
and this really need to be checked. That's why for us we are really staying on the track to say, let us address this question holistically. You cannot only task the Electoral Commission to do the right things when certain aspects which are so important in pushing for free and fair elections are not being addressed.
Thank you very much. Let me come to the old man of the clan. Andrew, I know you have followed the elections. You have seen your 113, and you have seen how the elections have gone. When you look at 2026, and you look at our political terrain as a country, what do you predict, especially with the National Unity Platform coming out and purportedly claiming a protest vote? The National Resistance Movement has a roadmap, squabbles within DP, PFF not registered. What do you see? You've talked about apathy. What in your snow globe do you see happening to our elections, and how do they determine the future of this country?
First, I should tell you, it is very, very difficult to predict the future. So I can say that between now and December, many things can happen that can turn the situation around. So I'm going to qualify my predictions by saying, holding all other factors constant. If an election were held today, one, there is extensive voter apathy. I believe that the voter turnout would fall to maybe 40%. For the following reasons. One, the opposition, under the leadership of Robert Kyagulanyi, aka Bobby Wine, is disorganized, rudderless, weak, hopeless. It is incapable of inspiring many people to show up and vote. It is locked up in an echo chamber where the most enthusiastic components of the opposition think, in that small echo chamber where they think that everybody agrees with them. What they don't not understand that while it is true that the vast majority of Ugandans, maybe 65% or 70% of the population of Uganda, are disenchanted with Museveni, that does not necessarily mean that they support the opposition. It's like you see, my grandson here, Robert, Kanusu, assuming he had a very pretty wife and they fell apart because he was cheating on her or abusing her, it is not automatic, Timothy, that she will fall in love with you. The fact that they are angry, she's angry with him, does not necessarily mean that she's going to be in love with you. Sarah Birete, would you agree?
Quite an interesting analogy.
You see, yes. So the fact that people are disenchanted with Museveni is not automatically true that they will go to vote for Bobby Wine. So the opposition people, so the people hostile to Museveni may be 70% of the Ugandan electorate, but that does not translate into votes for the opposition. That's one. So because of that, because the opposition is virulent, angry, yelling and shouting on social media, abusing everybody, they switch off so many people. So people will not show up to vote. Now we come to NRM. NRM is another unmitigated disaster. First of all, as a party, the NRM is dead. In fact, if you separated the state of Uganda from the NRM, there would be no party called NRM. NRM is like an evil creeper that is leaning on an oak, the oak being the state. So the infrastructure of the state, you know, an evil creeper, you know these plants that grow on a wall or something else? That's the state, yeah? The perimeter wall, it can grow on another tree, it can grow on an electricity pole. There are plants that you...
Yes.
If you remove that prop, it falls down. That's the NRM. You remove the state, there is no NRM. Internally, they are divided. Also, NRM lost its moral purpose to say we want to develop the country. So they have retreated to what you call a cash and carry government. Everybody is in it for what in Zenfunirawa. Then the sense of the country is lost. Museveni has grown old. He's both physically and intellectually exhausted. At the same time, he wants to keep direct control of so many nitty-gritties, and everybody now wants to use him. It's another depressing situation. So, in those circumstances, if Museveni releases 100 billion for his election, he is lucky if 10 billion is spent on the election, because people will just go to the money and eat it. And everybody who's, the more public spirited persons are quitting elective politics. And as they withdraw, the more ruthless those who are willing to use hook and crook means, sell a house, deplete your assets, go bribe voters and win an election and then come and loot the state, are beginning, their share of representation within NRM is also increasing. So you have two sides. One is a very decadent group that has lost the moral purpose, and the other is a very angry, virulent group that is suffering from too much self-righteousness, so it cannot listen to others. And then you have a large group of Ugandans who are in the middle, you know, maybe they constitute 60% of the electorate, who will not show up to vote because they are apathetic or they are in disagreement with both sides. And this middle, for some strange reason, has not found, I would call this a dormant volcano, or I would call it social dynamite, but it has lacked a spark, it has lacked a leadership to catalyze it, to come to become the pivot of our politics. I think that the two extremes tend to attract people. The other ones are looters, these are grievance driven. So the two are fighting on the extremes, but the middle has withdrawn. And I think that's the tragedy of Uganda. So what we are likely to see in the next election is a very, very low voter turnout. Let me say it reaches 40%. Museveni will get 55% of the 40%, which is about 27% of the registered voters. And Bobi Wine maybe gets 40 or 38%, or whoever will be running there of that. So you have a very narrow minority running the country because the middle has withdrawn. So the only thing you can pray for is that a third force emerges, or a third candidate who is able to rally this 60% and offer them hope. Because what I see is Museveni's advantages in the election are tactical. His weaknesses are strategic. Let me show you. One, Museveni has grown very old. He cannot change that. That's a structural problem. He cannot go back to 40. So he's tired. Two, he has serious problems of governance. Look at the collapse of infrastructure across the country. The other day I was going to Fort Portal. My friend, we are back to 1985 when roads were totally broken. you go to schools and hospitals, you come to Kampala city, it's one continuous garbage dump. Everybody has built in a swamp. Kampala, a small rain, the city floods. Those are not problems. If you were to do drainage, you need 10 years to fix some of these problems. So Museveni cannot fix them in the next few months. That's a very serious weakness. Also the lack of, he can no longer reinvigorate NRM and give it a moral purpose, and then they become the champions of some progressive agenda for the country. So those are things that are so structural. His disarticulation from the youth, he cannot solve that problem. Unemployment, it needs a lot of time to create jobs. So he can't solve those problems. So he's way down. Then the demographics, younger people are not interested in the NRM as much as the NRM would wish. So, but his advantage is that the opposition is divided, it is angry, it is suffering from grievance politics or victimhood, but also it lacks, the opposition in Uganda are not scientific. I've never encountered a group of people who are incapable. Let me give you an example in the last election. I'm sorry to come always to the issues of rigging. Me, I'm a numbers person. There were 343, right, polling stations reporting about 100% voter turnout. 37% of them were in Nyangweso, but then you would find them in Nakaseke, Isinjiro, Kazo. They were concentrated in the Kato corridor. So the opposition say, you see, there was 100% voter turnout, and Museveni got 100% of the vote. Museveni got 6.1 million votes. Am I correct? The total number of votes cast in 100% voter turnout, which is really proxy for rigging, was 138,000. Right? So you can remove from Museveni, it cannot change anything. You can cancel all those 100% voter turnouts. It's just 138. So you, okay. So you see, you see, if you cannot count what matters, you are likely to make what you think matter. You are likely to count what you think matters. Those things don't matter. So the challenge they have is that if they were much more serious, and there's, you know, they call it the street light effect. A drunken man who has dropped his keys looks for them where the light is rather than where he actually dropped the keys. So that's what the opposition does. They go looking for things that I don't understand them when I look at them. Why can't these people sit and have a much more scientific approach to the challenges that they face and the country faces? And that is that actually voters are not showing up to vote. Why are people not interested in showing up to vote? The country is in a mess. We should be much more energized to vote for change. But people are withdrawing from voting. What is it that we are doing wrongly or we are not doing at all that is not attracting this large number of people from voting? Last election, the voter turnout was 59%. Presidential. Museveni got 60.4%. 57% of that. You see, so Museveni's total vote out of the total registered voters must have been about 37% of the total registered voters. That's a minority of the Ugandans. Why don't we ask ourselves, why are people opting out of voting? Are they satisfied with the status quo? Sarah Bireta was saying that there was violence. I should tell you, Sarah, always, I don't know how to the chain of causation, but in 2011, Museveni exercised no violence at all. In fact, he used a lot of bribery in that election. Voter turnout fell to 57%. Museveni got 68% of it. In 2016, Museveni unleashed violence across the country. Voter turnout shot from 57% to 68%. Museveni fell from 68% to 60.4%. It seems to me, I don't know whether I'm holding the chain of causation correctly, that whenever Museveni exercises violence, people get angry and actually show up to vote. And I have data from 2016 to show that late delivery of ballot papers actually worked in Kampala, worked heavily against Museveni, because we got the data from the Electoral Commission. We looked at polling stations where they delivered polling papers at 10 a.m., at 3 p.m., and at the next day. We found that Museveni actually performed better where ballot papers were delivered early, and performed double where they were delivered late, either the next day or 3 p.m. or 11 a.m. And therefore, we had to get to understand what causes this kind of behavior. If you look at the demographics, you find that, one, people got angry and thought Museveni was trying to cheat the election. So the youth in Kampala mobilized, got angry, and they stuck to the polling stations to vote. But you see, Museveni's voters are women and elderly. So the elderly could not stand the sun all day. And the women had to go back home to cook, to tend to kids, and do home chores. So Museveni's support base actually left the polling stations. But the Besigye support base, male, youth, angry, even called each other, texted each other, and they came to vote. So it didn't favor Museveni at all. If it favored him not at a tactical level, but at a strategic level, in the sense that results from Kampala came late, so results from outlying areas came early, and therefore were able to create an early mood that Museveni is winning. That's the only advantage he had, which I consider quite strategic. But these challenges, if you cannot sit down as opposition and strategically think about these issues that you are facing, when you come into government, how are you going to strategize for the country? If you can't even strategize for yourself, how are you going to strategize for the country if you're incapable of looking at data, thinking, thrashing through these ideas? So you tell me about 2026, I think we are going to see a collapse in voter turnout. People will opt out of the election. Museveni will win 55% or 40%.
Captain, when you look at 2026 as the national resistance movement, Andrew has said you really have no spine minus the state. Can you leave?
Let me say that.
Can you leave past the state?
I think that I will not be harsh to my old man, but old man of the clan. I think, let me put it as clear as it can be.
But let me add a question to that. What is the NRM offering in 2026 with a spineless state?
This is not a spineless state. I think this is Andrew's figment of fertile imagination. He's trying to project. I don't want to say that he's a prophet of doom. But I want to say that we have the political will that has been exercised over time has shown that the journey towards democratizing Uganda has been a process. It has been a process which has midwifed to a large extent and broadened democracy in this country. By the time we started, and I want you to understand the individual merit or the movement system in 1996 to the time we opened up the political space in 2006. You can see the metamorphosis, the journey that we have traveled. But it's important for you to note, and I want the listeners to be guided on this properly. And let me give you the area that I preside over and give you the narrative. In eastern Uganda, and I want to tell you that in the last elections, we had COVID. President Museveni did not campaign in any single rally, not one single rally. And it's on record. He only met his electoral college. I, as a volunteer of the National Resistance Movement, as the chairman of the National Resistance Movement, in charge of Eastern, I was able to deploy my personal helicopter. And I was able to carry out an average of nearly 6 rallies to 7 different rallies every day, coming back home late in the evening. What did that generate us? I covered districts like Sebei, where it's very difficult to reach, Swam in the area.
So you are breaching the COVID rules?
No, of course not breaking the COVID rules, but I carried out elections. No government will negotiate itself out of power.
That's it.
And I want you to understand one fact, that if we had all sat back, definitely there would be no elections because the elections were declared. Let me tell you, what did we generate? Because all the other political parties were in the arena. The National Resistance Movement, and I want to give you the statistics of the eastern part of the country. I was able to deliver 97 members of parliament of the National Resistance Movement, 25 independent NRM-leaning members of parliament. NUP with this wave only was able to deliver 2 members of the opposition from NUP. JEMA delivered 1, Basalirwa in Bugiri. FDC, in its internal confusion, Forum for Democratic Confusion, was able to deliver 11 members of the FDC. Now, the independent were only 2. What does that mean? Out of 141, the National Resistance Movement had a majority. Now, this shows you that democracy was alive in the East. The point I'm trying to give you,
yes,
this so-called spineless party is popular at the grassroots because we're a mass party. We're a popular democratic institution organization. And I want to assure you that whereas other people do not understand the internal issues, there is no political organization or political party in the world which does not have internal contradictions. Because people come in when they are multi-ideological, but form what you call a uni-ideological approach. And that's when you look at the big picture, the Mao Zedong approach. That's the foundation of our revolutionary party. We are strong on the ground, we're not spineless, we are solid. We continue to maintain and manifest internal revolutionary structures to ensure that the party can be able to build capacity, not for short term, medium term, for long term. I want to assure you, as I conclude,
yes,
the National Resistance Movement is here as a revolutionary party, and we're here to stay.
We'll get to that someday, and Captain, I hope you'll be back to answer those. Gentlemen and ladies, please allow me give the parting shots to the chairperson to give us those feedbacks he wants to give.
Thank you very much. You know, time is not on our side. First of all, on the issue of gazetting the NUP constitution. In brief, NUP requested or applied to the commission to gazette to change their constitution within the law. We did gazette the notice of change as required by the law. Subsequently, a group claiming or saying to be NUP members lodged a complaint with the commission, challenging the process that was generated by the NUP leadership to change the constitution. We invited them, but before we invited them, this group also went to court, sued the leadership of NUP together with the Electoral Commission, that why are we going ahead to gazette or to effect the changes in NUP constitution. So that case is still in the court. So when the two parties appeared before us, as were required in the interest of natural justice, the question was, can UEC preside over a matter where you are being sued in the courts of law? Can you be a judge beyond the cause? Of course not. So we told both parties that since we are a party in this suit, we cannot therefore be the ones to preside over this dispute. Let's wait for the courts to determine the dispute where we're a party. So that's what has held the gazetting of the NUP constitution up to this point. Because the case is in the courts of law. We cannot proceed on that front. Secondly, on the issue of PFF, it is not true that we have been verifying the signatures since August. When the promoters of PPF communicated to the commission about registration of the party, we responded and pointed out to them the requirements that they had to fulfill. They had to go and generate or gather the signatures, the required signatures from 2/3 of the districts of the country. That process took them up to about the end of November. They brought back the gathered signatures to the commission at the end of November. We do not merely rubber stamp these submissions and say, yes, you have submitted the signatures, therefore you are registered. We have got to verify that was Timothy approached, did he consent or agree to support this party or not? We have to do that on the ground. We have to reach out to these voters. Surely that process cannot take 2 weeks. So as we talk now, we have updated PPF or PFF, whatever. PPFF on the status of their signatures. And by last week, I think we still had about 10 or 15 districts to verify. We communicate to them officially. And I can say that by next week, we shall give them the final position, whether they have complied with the law or not. Now, on the issue of the role of security, I think, as Sarah has mentioned, that one of the factors that has heightened the tensed nature of our elections in this country is commercialization. People are disposing of their properties and investing in politics. The other day you had the minister saying, in 1 week I blew up 500 million. I can't continue like this. Now, when someone has invested heavily in a political process, do you expect that person to come with the mindset of losing the election? Therefore, if the people
do or die.
Yeah, do or die. If people are therefore bound to recoup what they have invested, they take all manner of shortcuts. Security has to come in and ensure that everybody plays by the books. However, even security, in their involvement, their roles, they are required to act within the law.
Thank you.
They are required to act within the law. And if one steps outside the law, for goodness sake, there are enough mechanisms. The citizens who are on the receiving end of these law offenders should take up the matter in the courts of law. Okay. Nobody stops them from doing that. You cannot blame that on the Electoral Commission. For us, what we do, one thing, well, because of time, I would have highlighted that when you talk of free and fair election, what does it entail? First of all, when you look at, the concept of a free and fair election is not defined anywhere, not in the Constitution or in the Act of Parliament, but it was defined by the Supreme Court in the Constitutional Petition, Presidential Petition number 1 of 2001, Dr. Kizza Besigye versus Yoweri Museveni and the Electoral Commission. The parameters of what constitutes a free and fair election were defined in that petition. If I had time, I would have read them out, but another time maybe. But when you look at that, the definition, you realize that the parameters point to the fact that there are so many actors, so many players in an electoral process. Each one of them with a role to play and to contribute to the attainment of a free and fair election. Okay. Campaigns, nominations, and so on and so forth. And therefore, any person who is taking part in an electoral process must act within the law. The problem with Uganda is that people don't want to comply with the law. That's why we have, now for example, in the issue of corruption. Corruption is so adverse in the country. Are you going to say we don't have sufficient legal framework to address the issues of corruption? Are you going to say that the courts are playing kid gloves with the people who are taken before the courts of law? So many have been convicted. So I think the issue is that we must, whatever we do, we must act within the law.
Thank you. Let me just read 3 messages and we call it a night. Thank you very much, Timothy, for the show.
Civil society.
Civil society.
Civil society. All right, okay. Now, Sarah, you are aware that the Minister of Internal Affairs, I think, has been, or it vetted or verified civil society groups or something like that. Okay? So I do not know when civil society called you, that was part of their verification process.
Crime
but it was not, well, I don't know, I don't work.
They said they are doing due diligence for the Electoral Commission.
I'm not aware of that, I'm not aware of that. But all I want to say that the process of verifying and considering applications by civil society groups and individuals, conduct voter education, election observation is an ongoing process, and very soon you'll be informed.
Thank you. Just one message. Thank you, Timothy. Dr. Sarah is being impartial and straightforward. Those kinds of people we need to shape the politics and the landscape of our country. However, those who have resorted to remain in the NRM tool should first scrutinize themselves before coming to public and broadcasting such. Okay, thank you very much. I submit the lectures that are coming in. The RDCs are supposed to account to us, not hold us as security organs and things like that. Okay, a lot of messages coming through, but time is fast spent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Justice Simon, we shall have you again, especially as this process continues. I will leave you with this quote: "An inch of movement is better than a mile of intentions." Good morning.
That's a good one.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
I'd like to thank all our clients, our valued taxpayers, the people that we serve as we collect revenue for building our nation. I thank you very much for the questions you have sent through this program of Buza Commissioner. On behalf of URA, I would like to pledge that we are committed and we will continue to answer all the questions that you ask through this platform. The whole purpose for this program is to ensure that your pain points, your questions are efficiently responded to. So I would like to encourage all our taxpayers who have questions to ask to please utilize this program that we are running on UBC, that will be receiving your questions through the numbers that you've been given, and URA will be available to answer these questions every Monday and every Wednesday during the 8 o'clock news bulletin. And then on Sunday, after the news, we'll have a full response to all the questions that will have come in during the week. I thank UBC for supporting us in reaching our taxpayers, and I thank our taxpayers for responding positively to this program. Thank you very much.
Buza Commissioner. Tonight on UBC.
How do people again end up having land that is registered in such places?
Wetland is protected wherever it is. It doesn't matter whether you own the title or not.
There are people that were growing flowers and some vegetation. How does that affect the good things that come out of wetlands that you mentioned?
To grow flowers there, you create channels. That is already destroying wetland functionality.
Some people expect that there would be even compensations of these buildings that are brought down and other activities.
We cannot compensate you because we are not dispossessing your ownership. We are only saying remove the illegal use and have legal use.
Tonight on UBC. This week, our conversation continues with Nicole Shani, the founder of Shani Foundation, that provides professional hair braiding training to all unprivileged women, equipping them with marketable skills for the economy and independence.
In 2001, there was some NGO who wanted me to train their girls. So when I started the training, I said, okay, oh no, they told me we are going to partner where every time we have a refugee, because the NGO was rehabilitating the refugee, those ones who have been mistreated, those ones who have been rejected, so they have been rehabilitating them.
This week on UBC.
It's the freak himself, DJ Santos, the problem.
Oh my God!
So run back to the studio, Chimney Records.
From the blues to the streets of Africa, DJ Santos. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at DJ Santos.
Can you play that song? Set the mood for me.
Hallelujah, let's go!
You say that I blow his mind every time I'm activated. You just trying to catch